Theodore Roosevelt once said, "The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena,
I believe there's a hero in all of us.
so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat,
Seize the day.
whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and spends himself in a worthy cause,
And I'm gonna stay right here and fight for this lost cause.
who at best, if he wins, knows the thrills of high achievement, and if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly."
I'm gonna show you how great I am.
Hey, good morning. Peter the Pilot here with Dog is My CoPilot. We're a nonprofit based in Jackson, Wyoming. We do the long-distance transports for the dogs that are at risk for euthanasia to the organizations that would never put down a healthy animal. 4 things that you can do to help us. You can adopt, you can foster, you can volunteer, or you can donate. You can see I've got an aircraft full of animals this morning. You know, Dog is My CoPilot has flown almost 14,000 animals. So be part of the solution and not part of the problem, and thanks for watching Dog is My CoPilot.
Hi, once again, everybody, and welcome in. I'm Ed Berliner, and this is a special edition of The Man in the Arena. These are the shows that no matter how many times I do programs, I love to do, I have a passion to do, because this speaks to my soul. As a fur daddy with 2 wonderful kids, a 65-pound Norwegian elkhound who thinks he's a little boy, and a 26-pound beagle who thinks that she's in charge of the entire house, anytime I get to talk about dogs, it's a perfect day. And not only do I get to do that today here on The Man in the Arena, but I get to do that about an excellent organization that is saving the lives of animals across the country, specifically in one area of the country. Now all we have to do is get them a 747. We get an old 747, and we start packing them with dogs to go coast to coast. That's what we're going to do by the time we finish up and raise all the money today. It is a pleasure to welcome. Let's get right to it. We have so many stories to tell. He is the president, he is the co-founder of Dog is My CoPilot, and I first saw this story on CBS this morning, and I said, I have got to have him on the show. He and his people were nice enough to get a hold of me right away, and we put this show together. Peter Rork joins us on The Man in the Arena today. Peter, thanks so much for being here.
Ed, thank you for having me on your program.
Oh, this is I get to do something good for the puppies, and I get to really tell great stories, and that's what it is first all about. Let's start right at the beginning, because there's so much ground to cover here. You are an orthopedic surgeon. You'd put in your time. You had retirement in front of you. Peter, go play golf. I mean, isn't that's what every doctor does. But there had to be a moment there where you decided there was going to be something for me that's other than just hanging around the house.
Yeah, I've always been a pilot, and I always thought aviation would be part of my retirement picture. My wife Meg and I used to do the occasional animal rescue flights, 1 dog at a time. Not very efficient for that dog. It was certainly a game changer. And then she suddenly passed, no medical history, and it destroyed me. I was a broken man, and I walked out of my medical practice and just for months just hibernated with our rescue dog, Doyle. And I got a phone call from a friend of mine telling me that Meg would want me to be happy. So I needed to get out there. And the only thing, I'd been spending months with my rescue dog, and I thought, this dog is helping me put the pieces of my life back together. Maybe it's something I should explore. So I got in my 206, and I had a group in Jackson, Wyoming, my hometown, contact me about bringing dogs in from San Francisco and the San Francisco SPCA. when I flew out there, the gal who runs the program, Marty Watts, said, if you really want to make an impact, let me introduce you to Sharon Lohman. Sharon was running a program called New Beginnings in Merced, California, which is in the Central Valley. So I flew down there and I walked through the local animal control center, and my jaw just hit the floor. They were euthanizing over 90% of all the animals that came through the door. The local community was not into spay and neuter. It was a terrible mess. And Sharon would pull 20 or 30 dogs a week out of the facility and put them in a van and drive them up to Portland or Seattle or Missoula, Boise, Salt Lake, Denver. And these are 12, 14, 16-hour trips one way. And then the poor people have to get back in the van and drive back to Merced. So I told Sharon I would do those flights for her. And so I pulled all the seats out of the 206 and started flying for her a couple times a week. And that was beginning in September of 2012. So I did that for a number of years. It was always cramped in the 206, not a lot of room in the airplane. Plus, I really couldn't take any of the much larger dogs with me. These were mostly the smaller, 12, 15-pound animals, because the size of the crates would bulk out the aircraft, and there was just no room, even with them stacked in the right seat sitting next to me. So after one especially cramped flight, my daughter Taylor, who's actually the general counsel for Dog is My CoPilot, convinced me that to get the larger aircraft that I had my eye on. And I knew a Cessna Caravan would be the solution to our problem, but we just couldn't afford it. I mean, they're very pricey aircraft. So I spoke with a broker who found one that was up in Canada, and it was all beat up. It was had almost 18,000 hours on the airframe. The interior was torn up, but it had been meticulously maintained. So I looked at that plane. I said, this is it. So we got the price and started flying the dogs. And I went from flying 20 animals at a time to sometimes over 200 animals at a time. So that's when our numbers really took off and really exploded. So we're really flying a lot now. And then until this year, the first 8 years, I did all the flying myself. So I was getting a little tired, a little fatigued, and needed a break. So we got a very nice grant from the Petco Foundation last year, and they gave us the Love in Action Award. And I used that money to go out and find 3 volunteer pilots who I trained and sent them off to flight school to fly the Caravan.
Oh, nice.
And 2 out of the 3 are still with us. One of them, he just couldn't handle the part-time schedule or the weather issues and all the issues that come with transporting over 100 animals at a time. So my flight involvement has doubled again, but we're on a mission. We'll fly 55 missions this year. We are slated to fly over 70 missions next year, and the aircraft is going strong. It's going in the shop this winter for a glass panel upgrade, and the turbine has to be overhauled. So some pretty pricey items. But when I started this 8 years ago, I made an emotional commitment to give it at least 10 years or 10,000 dogs, whichever came first. Now,
You're way past 10,000 dogs.
Blew through that 10,000 dog mark a couple of years ago. I actually brought that dog home with me and adopted him. And so I started looking, well, 20,000 is a pretty good number. Let's go there. And so with the help of the 2 guys who are still on board helping me, and I'm always looking for qualified pilots who want to want to help out and be part of the solution and use their pilot's license for something useful. Uh, we're on it for the long haul.
Well, look, you realize that you're going to go for 20, and then you're going to hit 30, and then you're going to go 40. You realize, of course, Peter, that you're just too darn dedicated to this, and you're never going to hit the ceiling. Thankfully, you know that, right?
Yeah, yeah, Ed, that's an excellent point. But you and I think we're in the same situation where we like our dogs better than most people we know, and so it's I
I'm
and
with
if
you.
we
But
just recently go ahead.
what's the emotional pull on all this, Peter? Because you talked about how it all began, and there was a huge emotional pull for you to get involved. And I know that any time that I introduce people to shelter dogs and get them to adopt, it is an emotional time for them to have to do that. I just recently had a friend of mine who hasn't had a dog in more than 20 years, and he actually went from South Florida to New Orleans because he saw a story about dogs that had been abandoned because of the storms in New Orleans, and he saw a dachshund and he used to have doxies as a kid, and he flew there. But I think it was all the years that I sort of wore him down a little bit and said, "You got to get a dog. You got to get a dog. You got to do this." It's that emotional, heart tugging pull that's there. So, from your perspective, I'd love to hear about that emotional pull when you got started, but the emotional pull now, because it probably is stronger than it ever was before. When you see these dogs and see the wagging tails and you know where they came from, it's I'd have a tough time keeping a dry eye. I really would.
Yes, well, we recently transported our 16,000th animal. It came out of
Wow.
El Paso, and I flew that dog along with about 80 or 100 others over to Troutdale, just outside of Portland. When I look and see what my dogs have done for me emotionally and putting my life back together, if I can introduce one dog into one family and have that same effect, I'm not helping just the dog. I'm helping the people. And recently, I was criticized that there are a lot of people who need help, and I shouldn't just be helping dogs. And I'm saying,
But you are helping
who's
people.
right? Who says I'm not helping people? So I am, and I think the dogs actually choose us. You see the dog, you make the contact, but the dog they'll make that connection, and that's the one that you bring home. And frankly, I've always felt that a house doesn't smell like a home without a wet dog smell. So, and those of you who know what that smell is, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
No, you not only is it the wet dog smell, but it's also the fur that's in the house. Because I don't know if you've ever transported a Norwegian elk hound, but they're a double coated dog, and they probably have three times their body weight in fur that winds up in the house. And it's funny. I have friends of mine who are dog owners, and they go, "Look, if you come into my house and you have any problem with dog fur getting on your clothes, then don't come into the house. The house belongs to the dog, so you need to understand that right from the start." So yeah, you're a medical doctor. I realize that it's from orthopedics, but even you have to understand that it's and you do. It's that do no harm thing from doctors, but it's also the emotional pull from people that we're getting involved in here. You become I think you become psychologist more than you become anything else many times, where you see people who desperately need a push. This is their push that you're providing, yes?
Yeah, and and these dogs are, they're at risk for being euthanized, and I can't blame the shelters that I'm flying for. I mean, they have three options with the animals. They can adopt them out, they can foster them out, or they can transport them. And still, if they're taking in 50 or 100 dogs a day in some of the larger cities, I mean, I go through these facilities and there are 4 or 6 dogs in each kennel. It's really heartbreaking. So we fly the dogs that are are going to be euthanized, and then we'll always fly them to a group that doesn't use euthanasia as animal population control.
Do you
So
find
we
that
go from the
changing, Peter? Because certainly there's clean out the shelters programs now. It would seem that at least the more reputable shelters across the country are now doing everything they can to stay away from euthanasia, or at least that's what it seems like. Do you get that from the shelters that you work with and what you find out around the country?
it's that's another excellent point. Yes, and I also want to point out that although I appreciate you chatting with me and we're chirping back and forth and trying to get the word out, the real heroes here are the people who go into those shelters every single day and clean out the stalls, groom the animals, exercise, change the water, feed them, get them leash trained, try to teach them some basic verbal commands. And they can look at the dogs sometimes for a couple of months. Now, my involvement with the animals when I fly them are 6 or 8 hours, and they're crated and they're in the back of the aircraft, and my interaction is rather limited, except while I'm loading and unloading, unless of course one breaks out of the crate, which happens once or twice a year, and then they end up sitting up front with me. But those are the people who really deserve the credit, and they don't want to use euthanasia, and they are desperate to find an outlet for these animals.
See, that word desperate, though, and I think that needs to be focused on a little bit more, because unfortunately, there are a lot of shelters across the country that are desperate to stop killing the animals. And I'm one of those guys, as a journalist, I still use the word itself. Euthanasia is a fine word, but what they're doing is they're killing these animals who are simply looking for a home and they have no other choice. Do you find, I mean, certainly what you're doing is in the regions that you're picking up the dogs and you're taking them up to the Pacific, you're taking them up to Wyoming, you're taking them to certain areas. Do you find that there's more organizations, because there have to be others, who are trying to pick up that slack, if you will, and now trying, whether it's transporting by car, transporting by plane, doing whatever, that there's others who are trying to fill these gaps with dogs that could be euthanized?
Yeah, if you draw a line between Denver and Salt Lake City, the farther south you go, the worse it is. And the farther north you go for the animals, the better it is. And it's a function of educating the people. I mean, they're not bad people, but they just have to stop being part of the problem and have to be part of the solution. And spay and neuter is the answer. I mean, it's always been the answer, always will be the answer.
How do we do that, though? Because I hate to interrupt, but I want to stop you right there, because when you say part of the problem, that's always what I push. Stop being part of the problem and be part of the solution. So how do we get that across to people that there are solutions here, that spaying and neutering? Look, I go back to the years where I remember when Bob Barker used to stand there at the end of The Price is Right, and he used to say, spay and neuter your dog, and people freaked out. They said, my God, Bob Barker's talking about animals here, and he's talking about spaying and neutering and these things. It's not done on network television. But he was ahead of his time. How do we do that, Peter, to convince people that it's a simple procedure and it will help in the end cut down on the number of animals that are out there and stop the suffering?
Yeah, it's certainly the numbers are moving in the right direction. The numbers of animals that were being euthanized just 10 years ago were north of 4 million a year. Now it's down to about 1.5 million. That's still 1.5 million animals being slaughtered every year that are the perfectly healthy animals that if I had room in my house, I would have more. But you're getting the word out. I mean, if I could pull a banner behind my airplane when I'm flying, I would. It's just that I just can't take on the additional weight. But it's every chance I get to talk to people now. I'm talking to the people who are part of the solution, both on the sending groups and the receiving groups. So, I'm preaching to the choir. And honestly, a lot of the people who need to get that lesson probably aren't going to be watching this program, or they turn the program on and they're not interested because it's not their issue.
You're
Well,
right.
it is their issue, and they they're only it's a binary solution, part of the problem or part of the solution.
Don't we have to
And
reach down to
even
the
if you
human
can't
level?
adopt or foster, there's certainly no reason why you can't donate and let somebody else do the heavy lifting for you. Instead of lifting your $5 Starbucks coffee, donate that $5 to the local facility, and believe me, they can really stretch out a dollar bill.
Well, see, here comes the next point, and I think it's worthwhile talking about with somebody who has experience doing it for a number of years, and basically you're on the ground floor. I hear this from a lot of folks, and I'm sure you hear it as well, where they will go, look, there's so many charities out there right now. Are you kidding? My goodness. And we have charities that involve human beings, and we have children, and we have so many other things that need to be done. How can you look me? And I actually had somebody say this to me one day. How can you look me in the eye and ask me to donate to something that's just animals? And I took a step and I said, do you realize that this is about humanity? And yeah, you can donate to the Cancer Society and you can donate to others, but they have these massive, massive machines that work every single day, and they're all good at what they do in generating money and corporate sponsors and the millions of dollars that they have. There are smaller organizations that don't have that, like Dog is My CoPilot. And I don't think, Peter, they realize sometimes how far a few bucks goes. And if you put a few bucks here and you put a Starbucks coffee together here and there, it makes a massive difference to every charity, right?
Yeah, even if they don't want to donate money because they're not trusting on how the money's going to be used, buy a bag of dog food and drop off the bag of dog food.
Sure.
That will help. The one thing that surprised me when after the segment on CBS Sunday Morning showed, and then we did a Fox News interview, NBC Nightly News, is the hate mail I was getting. Addressing exactly that. I'm either polluting the environment by flying an airplane and burning jet fuel. I'm not feeding the hungry. I'm not housing the homeless. And my executive director, Kara Pollard, who she shields me from most of this, but she sent
I'm
me one the
aghast.
other
I
day,
really am.
and she says, "Well, you have to look at this one." And the guy, there's a whole litany of complaints about what we were doing, and then he called me a stupid moron. I said, "Kara, you have to respond to that. You have to say that's Dr. Stupid Moron to you, buddy."
Congratulations. Well played, sir. Well played.
Yeah.
But
But
that's
if
I'm
you're doing the
shocked
right
that
thing,
look, maybe I'm not, and this is I've got to have some naivete here working, because after all the years that I've seen, and certainly what happens in America these days, to have people insult everybody over the most stunning little minutia, I guess I shouldn't be shocked at all that this happens. But I doesn't that speak to, again, Peter, I keep coming back to this word humanity. Isn't that what this is all about at the end? It's the fact that we have one life, we have a short existence on this planet, and if we just show a little humanity, we win.
yeah, yeah, it's very true. I mean, I just can't imagine my life without my three rescue dogs at home. I'm on my way down to Hobbs, New Mexico today for a flight up to taking dogs, so a flight up to Denver and Salt Lake City, and then back up to Wyoming. But I've got a caretaker who watches my dogs while I'm gone. But honestly, I miss them sleeping on my bed at night.
Wait a minute now. We're told don't let the dog sleep on the bed at night. I go to people who say that, the dog psychologist. Say, you have no purpose being in my house whatsoever, because
they live here. You do not.
they live here.
Right.
I mean, that's it. This is their home. You let them be their home. I want to go back and I want to talk about the you alluded to it briefly, but I want to make sure we touch on it. COVID-19 has changed everything in the way we live in America. It will change the way that you and I live for the rest of our lives, certainly, and will impact generations to come. And I found it interesting that while the pilot has other things to do, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, Peter the pilot will make sure that you understand that there is a message to be had here, even while at 10, 15,000 feet.
Hey everybody, Peter the pilot here. Hey, just with all this corona fear, the animal shelters still need your help. So if you can, go by and adopt or foster or volunteer or donate. Their problems never end. We've got a load full of dogs flying from El Paso up to Wyoming and Montana today. So we're still part of the solution. Won't you be as well? All right, thanks for your time. And follow the dog as my co-pilot.
Peter, the thing that I found amazing in all this is when I started to see the stories, I thought that with COVID-19, and there's a lot of people, God bless, who are out of work right now, who have to feed their families. They have to feed their children. And I think what's terrible is when we see a number of dogs, and I'm constantly seeing the stories, and man, I got to choke back when I see these people who are giving up their dogs, who are part of their families because they can't even feed their kids. But what I found interesting was actually adoptions are up in the COVID-19 era, which kind of shocked me. I thought they'd be down, but people are turning now to the dogs that you're delivering and others like this who are making sure that they're there because they're bringing some solace to people right now. They're making them feel as if they have a family. They're making them feel whole again. Yes?
Yeah, if I can put my doctor hat on for a moment.
Please do.
There are rational responses to the presence of this or any other pathogen, and there are irrational responses as well. And I think some of the irrational responses are creating that effect that from which this country is currently suffering. We've seen an uptick in the number of fosters and adoptions now that people are self-isolating and staying at home. My concern is that once the country opens back up again and people start going back to work, they're going to be returning these dogs back to the shelter because they don't want the animal to be alone at home. And they say, oh, it's not fair. Say, well, how is it fair for them to be in a kennel at the facility that may euthanize them better than sleeping on your couch all day long? So I'm concerned we're going to see a kind of a backtick on the number of animals, but hopefully that the dogs will do what they do. They become part of the family. I mean, honestly, dogs threw their lot in with humans, 10,000 years ago, and they said, okay, we'll watch the sheep at night. All we want are a couple table scraps, and it's been a great collaborative effort ever since. And so I hope we don't see that reversal of the adoptions going on.
I want to talk to you about the rescues that you put together here, and there's two that I want to talk about specifically, and I want you to get to discuss with us here. One was Hurricane Harvey, which it seemed as if all of the various material that I read from Dog is My Co-Pilot, what you did during Hurricane Harvey still seems to strike a real emotional chord with you because that was a real rescue situation.
Yeah, what we needed to do is help empty the shelters before the storm came, because they knew they were going to have a large influx of animals that were either abandoned or separated from their family or whatever. And what we don't want to do is go down immediately after the storm, because then we have a situation where dogs that have been separated from their families are flown from Texas up to Seattle, and then the people come around and they start looking for the dog, and they say, well, I'm sorry, your dog is 1,200 nautical miles away from here, and our transports are one-way transports. We're not going to, we can't afford using our resources to return one or two animals when we're flying 80 or 150 at a time. So mistakes like that can occur.
Does that happen a lot?
I'm sorry.
Does that happen a lot where you've transported dogs and people actually come looking for them again?
It not a lot, but it just has to happen once, and these people are rightly very upset, and
Sure.
they look at me as the source of the problem, and I'm just the bus driver, really. I mean, I'm trying to help out the shelters. They're the ones who pull the animals. The receiving groups are the one who tag the animals that feel that they can get them adopted out. And that what we provide is that long distance transportation where ground transportation just doesn't make sense. So a lot of these facilities can't put them in a van and drive them 3 hours because that next facility is in the same boat that they are. So we'll fly them from Texas to, up to Washington or Idaho. I mean, that's like a 20-hour drive or more. Our flights out of Laredo, Texas, up to Spokane. I mean, you look on that MapQuest, and it's a 26-hour drive, and that's without any stops. So it's got to be over 30 hours. And keep in mind that once the dogs are in those crates, they stay in those crates until they get to their destination. So that's brutal. That's brutal on the people up front. That's brutal on the dogs in the crates. No food, no water. So it's they're in there with whatever messes that may occur. And they do occur, that's for sure, even on my relatively shorter flights.
Have you ever had, and I hate to ask this, but it's all part of it. You've got, I think, and I have to check this. You've got about how many dogs? About 250 dogs that you can put in a plane at one time, yes?
Yes.
Okay. 250 dogs. That's a lot of work to get them in here. And you've got all these crates sitting in here. And you're in a plane flying it, and you're in a plane flying at what height?
Yeah, we fly between 13 and 14,000 feet.
Okay. So my avionics was correct when I said about 10, 15,000 feet. I was good in there because, I'm not a pilot. I just play one on TV. So looking at all that with all this transport, dogs get out. I mean, every now and then there's got to be something that happens and somebody gets out of their crate. And that's a weight shift in this plane that's moving. It's not a lot of weight, but it's a few pounds here and there depending. Have you ever had a shaky moment up there where somebody got loose and it was like, oh goodness, I'm going to have to breathe deeply here for the next few minutes?
Yeah, now these dogs they're chosen for their ability to be adopted out at the receiving group. So they typically don't have any behavioral problems. Some of them will have a chewing problem, and that's how they get out. They chew their way right out of the crates. Or the crates we use them over and over again, dozens of times, and they're plastic, they start breaking down. And if the dog wants to get out, they'll get out. Now, we zip tie the gate for the front of the crate closed so they can't push that open. But they'll come out the side of it. And the weight transfer really isn't a problem for that type of thing. It's a 9,000-pound aircraft, and if you're moving 30 pounds forward or backward, I mean, if you're in that touchy a situation, you've got a problem even before you take off. But it's I often don't even know that the dog is out until they're up over my shoulder and I'm feeling the hot breath on my neck, and or they're panting and I'm my shirt's getting wet and I'm going, what the hell is that? And for the most part they just want to sit up front. They just want to say hello. I mean, these are friendly animals, but the dogs do what my dogs when they get in the car and I go to the grocery store, and they jump in the car and then they lie down. And I always look at them. I said, well, you know what? You could be doing that at home. Why do you want to be in the car? But they just want to be with me. And that's the same thing the dogs do when they're in the crates. Once that engine they're chirping a lot. They're making a lot of noise. on the tarmac. They're making a lot of noise while I'm loading the aircraft. But once that turbine starts spinning, this is a new sound for them, and these dogs have had a very rough life, and they just want to know, is it going to hurt? Uh, but then after a couple minutes, nothing bad happens, and then I take off, and these dogs are typically from sea level or close to sea level, and so when I get them above 12,000 feet, the air's a little thin. They'll take a little nap, and then they'll start waking up during the descent when we get to our destination. So these flights, for the most part, are pretty quiet. Usually, there's one that won't shut up the entire trip, and it's usually in the crate that's right behind my head. So,
Is it usually the little dogs? I mean, the little yap dogs?
no, little yappers. Yeah,
It's always them. They're always the ones. It's
but
not the big dogs are cool. They just sit back. For those who are watching, you're going to see a picture. For those who are listening on podcast, you won't see this picture. And there have been a lot of pictures that we've been talking about and a lot of video that we've been using as well. So if you're listening to us on the podcast, I heartily recommend that you go to the YouTube channel at welcometothearena.com and watch this show in video and with pictures, because there's a lot more to it. One picture I want to make sure that we show, if there's any doubt whatsoever, that Peter is the guy who should have been doing this and was destined to be doing this, it is this picture. Because first of all, I love the guy because he's a redhead. That's what Peter and I share in common, because Peter still got the red hair. Mine has disappeared over the years. But Peter, how old were you here, and do you remember the name of the dog?
yeah, that dog was named Smoochie, and it's clearly I hadn't made it out of the diaper phase at that point, or I was still experimenting with that. So I must have been 2 years old or so.
Is that a beagle or beagle mix?
No, it's a Basset Hound.
Ah, Basset Hound. Okay. We've had Bassets in my family too. We've had Bassets and Beagles. My first dog was actually was a Beagle that we started with that I remember many moons ago, which is why when we brought a Beagle into our house right now, it was like just welcoming in an old friend. I know that you have so many things to do. I do want to point out one thing that is very important to us before I get to a final question with you. October is Adopt a Shelter Dog Month, which is perfect because here we are taping the show and going live on September the 30th. So the whole month of October, people have a chance to adopt a shelter dog. And Peter, I think it's important to note that the people that you work with, and not only that, but the people all across the country at shelters, it's important for people. You know, it's tough for me, Peter. I got a tough time going to a shelter because I want to lay out the credit card. I want to say, give them to me all. I'm taking them all home. Everything here. Every bird, every rabbit, every cat, I want to take them all home. It's tough, but it's sort of, when we talk about that humanity, people need to, I hate to be cruel, I hope I'm not being that way, but people need to get over it because you're going to find your best friend there, and you're going to find a forever friend there for the rest of your life, and it's the rest of their life. And I don't think people understand sometimes how the dogs themselves, they choose, they look, they're part of it, they look forward to this. You kind of got to get over that, and you have to be part of the solution in doing all this.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not being
The
cruel,
bottom
am
line
I?
is that the bottom line here is that this is not a dog problem. This is a people problem.
Thank you.
And for every dog that's in a shelter, there's a person responsible. And so I was in the fixing people's problems business for forever. I was, in the operating room as an orthopedic surgeon. And really, when you think about it, I'm still fixing people's problems and their messes. It's just that I'm taking care of the dogs. The dogs are very grateful, and I don't have very many malpractice animal rescue attorneys coming after me. So I sleep a lot better at night. But this is not a dog problem.
People need to understand that when you do the little things, the neutering, the spaying, and when you get your dog from the shelter, please stop going to the puppy mills, stop going to the pet stores, walk past every pet store. Peter, if I had my druthers, I would take every pet store in America. I would put them out of business tomorrow. I would shut them down. These toy dogs and the way they sell them, it's cruel, it's inhumane, and there's all sorts of dogs waiting at shelters. And I point out to people that there are legitimate breeders across America who are doing it for the right reason. They breed certain breeds of dogs, and if you want to breed, that's fine. But there's more illegitimate ones than there are the legitimate breeders, and you've got to spend the time looking through them. You've got to research it, because otherwise you're going to get stuck, and somewhere there's a dog that is being used to breed over and over and over again. And I've seen these female dogs that wind up in the kennels and the shelters, and it's heartbreaking to see this far too often.
It is.
And that's why we become part of the solution instead of just being the problem. So adopt a shelter dog month for October. I know you have so many things to do, and I cannot thank you enough for this, and I hope that we do this again many times. But finally, I need to ask you, Peter, you've been doing this a long time, and we've talked about the fact that you will probably be doing it an even longer time. How do you deal with the emotions that you feel every day and
Well,
going through this?
honestly, I feel like Santa Claus arriving with a sleigh full of presents. And when I first started doing this in the 206, the adopters would actually meet me at the airport, and to see a little girl jumping up and down waiting for her new puppy, I mean, that was very touching and fulfilling for me. Now I do that on a much grander scale, kind of on steroids. But even so, it's what I'm doing, saving the animals, and how they saved me when I was in the darkest chapter of my life. And if I can help introduce that into a family that maybe needs that glue that's going to hold the family together, pets can do that. I mean, I'm glad that I can be part of that.
I love that. That's the glue that holds people together, because that dog becomes the center. That dog becomes the brother, the sister. It becomes part of the family. It's so true. God, I love what you do. I wish I could fly planes. If I could fly planes, I'd be there in a heartbeat. But instead, this is what I can do. So this is the best I can do. So this is exactly what I'm going to do, whatever I can do. Now, let's remind everybody of a couple things. By the way, whether you're watching the show, whether you're listening to the show, when we finish with Peter, there's a special feature I want you to watch, which talks a lot about the people who are involved at Dog is My CoPilot. You'll spend some time and you'll learn about them, because they all deserve accolades for what they do, and I want to thank them very much for helping me here. But before we get out of here, here's all the things. Email. If you want to get a hold of Peter and the folks at Dog is My CoPilot, flight updates at dogcopilot.org is the way to do it there. If you want to contact them, there's a phone number, 307-359-5452. It is up on their website as well, so I'm not giving away trade secrets here. Facebook and Instagram, Dog is My CoPilot Inc., because there's a lot of Dog is My CoPilots out there, as I found out, Peter. So you had to add Inc. Make sure you add Inc. to it, because you can then find what they're doing. Twitter is at Dog CoPilot Inc. YouTube, Dog is My CoPilot Inc. is where you can find them there, and you'll find out all the contacts to the website. Please donate a couple of bucks. Peter said it right. Go without Starbucks for a couple of minutes. Here, look. Here's my coffee cup for the morning, okay? Instead of buying the coffee cup and going to Dunkin' Donuts to fill it, take the coffee from in there. It's $3 or $4 lousy bucks. I usually go to Dunkin' and I get the sandwich and I get the coffee. It's like $6. I'll take that $6 and I'll put it in the Dog is My CoPilot. Instead of that, I can do without this. I'll go drink water for the day and my dogs will be happy too. And that's the most important thing. Peter, I cannot thank you enough for this, and I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy day. I want to thank your staff for getting involved and helping to put this together. And what you do is holy, my friend. It is HOLY, not holy, which with an E, which is what the dogs would do with the T-shirt. And what you're doing is putting families together. You are a godsend for so many people, and I cannot thank you enough. I wish you many years to do this, and anytime, any single time. Matter of fact, here's what I want you to do. I want your folks to put together a couple of 30-second or 60-second commercials. I'll voice them for you, okay? I'll give you the free voice for them if they want to write the script and help them. We'll put those commercials together. and I will help them, and I will run it on my shows, and I will give it to them. I'll give you my nothing, zero, cost you zero, and I'll help you put together the commercials for it, which you can run anywhere, anytime, and I will run them on every single show that I do from now on Man in the Arena. Is that a deal?
It's a deal. Thank you so much, Ed.
Anything I can do at all, you tell them to get in touch. Peter, thanks so much, and God bless, my friend. And stay safe, please. COVID and flights as well. Stay safe. Thanks so much. So don't forget, everybody, it's Dog is My CoPilot. We've given you all the way to get in touch with them. Please do. Please help. Please donate. It only takes a couple of dollars, and it will help put families together. That is the most important thing. Whew, I feel better already at a time when we need something uplifting. For Peter Rork, the entire crew at Dog is My CoPilot, and for everybody here, thanks so much for joining us. Let's do it again. Let's make families happy. Rock on, true believers. I'm Ed Berliner. Until we meet again, see ya.
Payne Brown, Animal Rescue Flight 7 Pumper, Romeo Alpha 4 for Castle and Custer.
My name is Peter Rork. I'm the president, founder, and pilot for Dog is My CoPilot. I'm a retired orthopedic surgeon. I've been a pilot for over 50 years. And 7 years ago, I started as a nonprofit to transport dogs out of the high-risk shelters to those facilities that will never put down a healthy animal.
Good to see you!
Nice to see you.
It's always good to see him because he is a longtime friend. Been flying for, our animals for 7 years now. Because they euthanize when it's full.
Yeah.
And it's full 98% of the time.
Well, hopefully we can distribute 150 golden tickets tomorrow.
Yes.
To their new lives. When I first started this, I had no idea how big the problem was. I went home right away, took out all the seats in the airplane. I said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to try to save as many as we possibly can. Kara is my executive director, and she's my ground control. She's amazing. She knows all the individuals, all the personalities, all the locations.
In 7 years, Peter has grown Dog is My CoPilot to flying 3,000 animals a year.
We serve primarily the 12 western states, all over in the south, and then we fly them north. So we have about 45 or 50 receiving partners for these animals. And tomorrow we're going to fly number 13,000, and I couldn't be more proud about that.
To think that more than 13,000 lives have been saved by one man, one plane, and a pilot with a huge heart is incredibly inspiring.
We're at the shelter in Merced loading up the animals for our flight today to Seattle, Spokane, Thompson Falls, Missoula, and Polson, Montana. We're going to have about 150 animals on board. Every flight is a little different. The challenges of loading the aircraft, the challenges of the weather. Occasionally we'll have to cancel a flight because of weather. My favorite reason for canceling a flight is that there aren't enough animals to transport. Sadly, though, we don't run into that very often. What we're after is saving as many animals as we can, those that didn't have a chance. But for the Petco Foundation to step up and really help us, we couldn't do it without them. It's really become something larger than I ever thought it ever would be. Before, when I was practicing as an orthopedic surgeon, I'd spend 12, 14 hours a day indoors. You should see the view from my office now.
Beautiful view of Crater Lake. What do you think?
Peter willing to fly them to other agencies who could take them on means those animals get that second chance. So it's really important to us.
I'm not the hero here. I'm the transport. The real heroes are the people who walk into the shelters every single day.
Fighting for these dogs and cats to have a second chance at life, and we couldn't be more excited to watch these dogs fly out to their forever homes.
Well, since forging the partnership with Peter and Dog is My CoPilot, we've been able to up our adoptions by hundreds of animals and saving so many more lives.
Thank you for everything you do.
Thanks, Peter.
Welcome to Wyoming. I think Peter embodies what love in action is.
Thanks for following Dog is My CoPilot. We couldn't do it without your help.